So this session is about the past, present, and future of system-wide approaches. We've been talking about silos, and the University of California is rife with them in terms of departments and campuses, centers and labs. And we are looking at successful ways of cutting across those silos. And so this UC Disaster Resilience Network is attempting to do that. And we thought we would start with a top-down perspective. So what's at the top of the University of California system? The Office of the President. And we have a member of our University Council who's the Vice President for Research and Innovation for the university system. She couldn't be here today. She's becoming a grandmother, or just became a grandmother for the first time. So she's prioritizing family, that's understandable, but she was able to record a message. So we're gonna start with that message, and then we're gonna look at the bottom-up approach. And we have a panel that's gonna talk about that from Santa Barbara. And then they'll also reflect on how you bring the top and the bottom together in kind of a side-by-side perspective. So let's have a look at what Theresa wants to tell us. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My apologies for not being with you in person. My first grandchild was due this week, and she did not disappoint. So I have a lot of joy in my life right now. But I remain very impressed with the passion and interest of this group to look at disaster resilience with a holistic lens for impact at scale. You have pulled together a rich group of experts from across our extraordinary university system and beyond, which is the only way to operationalize this type of work. But how do we really draw upon this momentum and accelerate forward? And what is the role of the UC Office of the President? So UC Office of the President, or UCOP, has a history of organized and informal facilitation of multi-campus groups and programs. For example, you may have heard of the multi-campus research units, or MRUs. The MRU is a research unit formalized by the university and the academic senate, and they are guided by a document called the compendium. The compendium provides the prescriptive framework for these MRUs to operate and report their progress over time. A very successful example is the UC Institute for Transportation Studies, which includes Berkeley, Davis, Irvine, and UCLA. The go-to entity for the state of California, ITS has expertise in all areas of transportation technology, systems, and policy. What is interesting to me is that there has not been a new MRU established at UC in over 20 years. And why is that? In my opinion, the support structure is not flexible for groups such as the DRN to respond quickly to emerging challenges and opportunities of the day. However, an interesting example to the contrary was brought to my attention recently, and it is the precursor to the DRN. That is the UC Haiti Initiative. This initiative, I've learned, connected UC students, faculty, administrators, and alumni with the State University of Haiti to create education, research, and public service partnerships as Haiti tried to redevelop following the 2010 7.0 magnitude earthquake with a reported death toll of over 160,000 people. This partnership was based on an MOU signed by all 10 UC chancellors, and it was formed very quickly. So how do we mimic this type of model and sustain it over time? Well, another example is the Natural Reserve System, but it's not an MRU. The NRS is overseen directly by my office, and there's a long history there that I won't get into. But the NRS is a network of 41 protected natural areas throughout California, and it's used by our university community for research, teaching, and public service activities. And we are trying to position the NRS as a system-wide testbed for climate action monitoring. Each campus of UC, except for UC San Francisco, has a set of reserves that they manage locally with the oversight of my office. For example, UC Santa Barbara manages 7 natural reserves, which range from marine coastal reserves to mountain ecosystems. There are several other types of multi-campus research entities, as I'll call them, as well as programs that have little guidance or no formal guidance at all. I know the DRN is looking for official status by UCOP. However, there is much to unravel in my own office in partnership with the UC entities, which also includes the national labs, agriculture and natural resources, and UC Health, as well as the 10 campuses. The Council of VCRs is having its first face-to-face retreat in over 4 years later this month. And this multi-campus research structure is front and center on our agenda. We're going to spend 2 or 3 hours unraveling what we have and where we can go to make the DRN and other entities successful in the future. As a final note, system-wide initiatives must be grounded in the realities and strengths of each campus and their surrounding communities in order to respond to local and regional needs. We can then come together for statewide impact and beyond. So with that, I highlight a great example of what I just said with the UCDRN campus-based committee at UC Santa Barbara, which my colleagues, Professor Appelbaum and Dean Armistead, will now present. Thank you for this opportunity for at least meeting with you for a couple of minutes, and I look forward to seeing you in person soon. Thank you.
So 2 things. For those of you who are not from the UC community, VCR is not a video cassette recorder. It's a vice chancellor research, very important. And the second thing is we are helping Theresa unravel some of that complexity to look for how we can get central support from the president's office. Having said that, Rich, can I turn it over to you for the bottom-up approach? I think we're still on. Eric, is that right? We're still.
So Joe describes this as bottoms up. I think of infant somehow when I think of that phrase. So I want to, before I go on, Theresa mentioned the UC Haiti initiative as an example of something that operates across campuses. So I want to give a shout out, Nico. This is for you, stand up. The UC Haiti initiative was Nico's brainchild some 20 years ago. And he has steadfastly pushed to have this exist, and UCDRN would not be here today if it weren't for Nico Pascal. So I just want to give him So I like to think of the UC committee as a kind of a showcase committee. That's, of course, because I am the faculty chair of that committee. Well, let me briefly describe it to you and how we operate. And I've said this, I think, in the breakout sessions that I've been a part of. My vision has always been, and I guess this is what we're calling bottoms up or side by side or something like that the stakeholders, people in the community, the county officials, community organizations, indigenous groups, and so forth, should really have a seat at the table and should help to shape UC response to climate issues and to climate resilience. And so I put a committee together a couple of years ago that has close to 40 members on it. It functions more as a listserv, I have to admit, than an actual functioning committee. A 40-person committee is not really operational, but it's been quite useful in that regard. The committee, our campus-based committee, is comprised equally of climate scientists, of UCSB people, climate scientists, administrators such as Katya, and the Walter Cap Center, which actually houses us, which is named after a former congressman from Santa Barbara. It includes Jim Caesar, who is head of emergency services on campus. So the idea is to bring together a wide variety of people, not just climate scientists. We also have people who do evaluation research, which is important in any of these projects. And then in the community, we have an equally large group. I have a campus co-chair, climate scientist, and then Jeff Green, who launched the morning, is my community co-chair. Jeff, those of you who heard him this morning know, he currently heads the Santa Barbara City College Foundation. Prior to that, he was head of the Fund for Santa Barbara, and he has a long history in the community. He's quite well connected. Santa Barbara Way, and I've been there since 1971, so I have strong roots in the community, which has helped greatly in pulling the team together. It includes Abe, who you'll hear from in a moment, head of the Bucket Brigade. It includes the county emergency managers, people from various county supervisor offices. It includes a number of people from the county who deal with resilience issues. It includes people from the Latino community and the Chumash community in Santa Barbara. So it is quite representative, and that's been extremely helpful in pulling together some of the projects we've done, and I'm not going to go through them in any detail, but I want to just mention them. For the system-wide request for proposals, which many of you I'm sure remember, we submitted a seed grant proposal, which was one of the smaller proposals. It was a couple $1 million. I thought that it really touched all the bases possibly. We had representatives on it from the county, from the Chumash tribal group, indigenous partners. We had Santa Barbara's flagship community organization, the Community Environmental Council, which dates back to the 1969 oil spill, which really launched the U.S. environmental movement. And we put together a project which really touched a lot of bases because it was driven by these organizations and what they felt was important. It involved, for example, resilience hubs, which Community Environmental Council had been working with the county on, places that people could go during times of fire. It involved indigenous fire prevention, indigenous burns, and burn scar restoration, a whole variety of things like that. Unfortunately, we didn't make it past the first stage of that, the LOI stage, which Theresa's not here, so I can't put her on the stand and ask her why that happened, but there was a strong call in that proposal, you'll remember, for strong community participation and involvement, and we did that, and I thought we had the climate side covered also. We also had a pilot in the larger project that Leroy put forth, which made it past the LOI, the letter of intent stage, but ultimately didn't get funding. And now we have a small project, which is part of a larger project with the reserve system, which will also involve the county, the Chumash community, Community Environmental Council, and looking at fire management and other things, and sort of test driving the analytic system that Leroy has been working on, the data system, that ideally will enable local communities to have a predictive sense of where vulnerable areas are. And what our role will be to review rollouts of this model and to give feedback to make sure that it is really useful in the community. So one more project which I've also mentioned is to work on some kind of a website, possibly artificial intelligence driven is kind of the fantasy that I've been pushing now for the last several months, if we can get funding for it, which would enable ordinary users to simply make a query, a dialogic inquiry, to have a conversation, and to find out what they need to know. You know, ask Siri, but with a little more robust response, rather than the standard approach of a database, which is where you have to enter data, people have to populate it themselves, and so forth. So that's sort of where we want to go with that. So with that background, I want to introduce the two of the members of the committee, one from the university, one from the community. So Katya Armistead is the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Dean of Student Life, and she's going to talk to you about what she is doing with students. Then Abe Powell is the head of the Bucket Brigade. He's also a director on the Montecito Fire Protection District. And I'll tell you all about the Bucket Brigade, which is a way that a person with a lot of enthusiasm, strong legs, and able to mobilize a lot of people can make a huge difference when a major disaster occurs. So let's begin with Katya.
Good afternoon. I have to go up there?
You said something about strong legs.
Strong legs, okay, yes. I guess I have strong legs. I work out. I played soccer for years. Anyway, hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Katya Armistead. My pronouns are she and her, and I am from the UC Santa Barbara campus. I'm also an alum of the campus. This is where I received my bachelor's degree and my doctorate degree, and I've been there for over 30 years. And my biggest focus is working with students. And so what I wanted to just share with you all as a member of Rich's committee is how important student involvement is, undergraduates and graduate students. And we also have another fellow here from Riverside. She wasn't introduced earlier, so I wanted to make sure I gave her a shout out that UC Santa Barbara is not the only campus with fellows. Through the UC National Free Speech and Civic Engagement Center, that was a mouthful, we, a colleague and I received something called the Voice Grant, and it's around civic engagement. And we worked with the CAP Center, the Walter CAP Center that Rich mentioned, that's also a huge contributor to our campus-based committee. We created a civic engagement class, and this is a class we're very proud of. We're on our third year, and we work with students in getting them engaged in their community and learn what civic engagement is. And it's not just, I think a lot of students think, oh yeah, it's registering to vote, but it is way more than that. And so we spend fall quarter really teasing out what civic engagement is, have a lot of guest speakers from mentors, teachers, nonprofits, our local politicians. And by the end of fall quarter, they're to select a project that they'd like to participate in. And winter and spring quarter, they receive units for actually doing this project. And the first year that we launched this class, Nico came to our class to pitch UCDRN and how they could get involved and help work on projects of their liking and what was needed. And that's where we have Jack join us. He's here somewhere in the audience. One of the first fellows. We had 3 fellows that year. 2 really followed through, and we got a lot of great stuff done. They worked with Nico and Joe and got the website started. And then the second year, we introduced UCDRN to my class, and we had another student join. He wasn't as prolific, but Jack continued on, and through another campus-based activity where I was meeting students and their parents, I recruited Sonnet. And I knew that I wanted to make sure that I got another fellow, and I was pitching it to students that I knew would be motivated and interested, and she was like, yeah, I want to do that. And so she has been great for both Rich and Joe in getting a lot of stuff done, especially administratively. So we've really appreciated the help with those 2. Jack just presented to my class this fall, just this last Monday, and already has a student interested in continuing on. I share that all with you because I think that, hearing presentations today and meeting folks, I completely understand the research that needs to happen, agencies needing to act, but I think we also need to make sure that we include our students in thinking about this and how they can be on the ground floor doing research, doing administrative work, understanding what that process looks like. We are looking at where we can engage more graduate students, hoping faculty would be willing to help by encouraging graduate students to do work in these many different areas. Their contribution to the future of this is very important. And so that's the big role that I play. I know being from the Santa Barbara campus, having some pretty significant tragedies and incidents environmentally and also by people. In 2014, we had a really horrendous shooting on our campus or adjacent in Isla Vista. And one of the biggest things that I learned from that, being the dean of students, is how much people wanted to know how they can get involved. And so we should never underestimate how people really do want to make a difference. And so I see it as our job is to create those opportunities. And with that, is that a good segment for you? Because this is a gentleman that's going to come up and talk about how people can make a difference. So yeah, I encourage you all to be thinking about undergraduates, how to engage undergraduates, young folks, so that they can carry on the work.
Get it? Yes. Bingo. Let's see. Hi. Can everybody hear me? It's been a long day, guys. I salute you all and your sitting ability. I'm more of a working out in the field kind of person, and all this sitting was very taxing for me, so I'm impressed. Thank you for sitting through these last little bit, and I'm really excited to get a chance to share something from the community perspective. So, we, as someone who grew up in Santa Barbara and had a lot of friends and even family members go to the UC, we've always kind of looked from the community level and wondered, like, how to connect the dots better. What are ways that we can become more interconnected, especially as a community resilience organizer? How can we connect more fully and really capitalize on the opportunity that's there for both the university and the community to become more interconnected in a changed climate right now when we really need to be. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, if I can get this PowerPoint to work. So the Bucket Brigade, what the heck is the Bucket Brigade? We started in 2018 in response to the Thomas Fire, and which denuded the mountains in Santa Barbara and burned over 1,000 homes in the region. And then 2 weeks kind of after we were able to go back to our homes from the fire, the largest natural disaster in Santa Barbara County history happened, which is the mountain literally came down on the community. And 23 people were killed, over 587 homes damaged or destroyed, and the mud was waist deep. And debris, rocks, parts of houses, cars. It was really something kind of on a geologic level, and that we'd never seen in my lifetime. And what we know is disasters are inevitable, and we know this. And in Santa Barbara, this is something we used to compete with Malibu. Are we the natural disaster capital of the United States, of California, or is it Malibu? And I don't know who it is, but we're up there, and you can see over the last 40 years, we've been getting hammered. And the hammering is increasing in frequency and intensity, and that's reflected statewide. So local communities across the state are also getting hammered with a greater intensity. And that is reflected nationwide in terms of what they call the billions at NOAA, which is disasters that cost over $1 billion. And this is what we're dealing with. And then at 2020, they broke the record again. We see this trend, and as local residents worried about our community and having gone through some of these disasters, seeing what's really possible, we're wondering, hey, where are we going to go with this? And then 2023, we've already broken the record again nationwide, and the year's not over yet, right? So we're in it, at the grassroots level, across the country, communities are in it. And the question always in the aftermath of a disaster is our community, or are we as individuals going to be helpless and just watch the suffering happen around us? Or are we going to be helpful? And a lot of people in a community we know want to help. They see something bad happen, they have an empathetic response, their heart starts pounding, and they're like, I gotta do something, and they don't know what to do. And on the one hand, that's a tragedy within the tragedy, but on the other hand, it's this huge opportunity. A lot of people that want to help, if they could be brought to bear on the situation effectively, right? And so it's a question. And the question is, how are we adapting to harness this power of community better in response to these bigger and more frequent disasters? And that's what the Bucket Brigade is here to answer. And our answer to this takes the form of three things. How do we harness the power of community to help people in a time of need? They need to be organized, they need to be trained, and then they need to be deployed in a time of need. And helping is doing what people need when they need it, right? And that's where the organization and training becomes really important, because if it's not what they need when they need it, it's not helping, right? Okay, so the Bucket Brigade, we put out a call to the community after the debris flow. Everybody felt like we were hosed. The insurance companies backed away and said, dig yourselves out. And 3,500 people showed up from the community. And you can see there were people 79 years old. There's a woman in the white outfit right there, one of the toughest diggers I've ever met in my life. And we dug and we dug and we dug and we worked. And what we did was empower the community to work together by facilitating this work and in connecting the people who needed help with the help that was needed, right? And who can help in this situation? Everybody, spontaneous volunteers, which is an epithet for FEMA in most disaster situations. We love them if you have a way to harness them and put them to work, and that's what a Bucket Brigade is for. So, kids, old people, families, school, university students. And so what happened in 2018? Let's just see what's possible. So 3,500 people showed up just spontaneously in response to this over 6 months and worked over 40,000 hours for free. Like gave that as a gift to their community, their time and effort. 1,000 people stepped up and donated, and that was 4,500 people responding to need in the community. And the interesting thing about that number is that's exactly 1% of Santa Barbara County. So this is a real 1% solution, right? Which we were impressed with, because normally it doesn't work that way, but this actually worked, and the work got done and moved the needle by these people working together, right? So what happened? Over 100 homes were dug out, a whole retreat center was dug out, 66 acres of public open space was cleared, over 1,000 trees dug out, 5 miles of trail restored, a lot of hugging, a lot of listening, and that's that's possible, and that was just done by people out of the goodness of their hearts, right? So real potential. And we saw it delivered in 2018. So, people came from all over the country, from as far away as Florida and other places, to do this work with us and to be a part of something that was just genuinely really inclusive and turned a sad, horrible situation into what became kind of the feel-good hit of the season, right? So what were the lessons? What did we take away from this? Those of us who were in this whole time. And one of the things was we're in a wash, rinse, repeat cycle with disasters, and that it's a cycle, right? So was this the first debris flow in Santa Barbara that followed a fire? No, this is a common experience in California, right? Fire and debris flow. So let's just talk for a second about the disaster cycle. For most people, the disaster cycle starts with the event, right? Something happens. When we talk about the event, let's say it's the fire, or in this case, a debris flow. Right? There's an initial response. That's the first responders, or if you're in disaster management, that's the rescue phase of the disaster, right? So when the fire engines are out there and the sheriffs and the National Guard, whoever's there, that's the response. And at some point they shut that down, usually within a week to 2 weeks. And then you're in the recovery phase, which lasts as long as it takes, right? And during that time, there's short-term recovery and humanitarian relief, and there's long-term recovery, finding housing, et cetera. And then you do an assessment and you try to plan and put yourselves back together, and then the last thing happens. Every time, we call this the great forgetting. Does everybody know, who knows what I'm talking about out here when I say the great forgetting? People forget that this happened. They want to. It's a natural response to trauma. They're trying to put it behind them. But when they do, we forget the lessons that we've learned, which in turn makes us vulnerable for the next time. And that's an important problem, right? But one of the things we see in every disaster cycle is the same gaps in service and the same needs going unmet. And the immediate relief is a big one. And that's one of the things we provided. But the other thing is rebuilding so that the same thing doesn't happen again next time. Huge need, right? And the last thing is trying to remember and work together before the next disaster comes so we don't lose our lessons, right? So if we don't meet these needs, we're never going to be resilient. We need to face this at the local level, okay? So let's just talk about this from our community, this resilience. I just want you to show you the disaster cycle for us. So 1964 fire, debris flow. 1969 fire, debris flow. This is the same neighborhood. Now we're in 2017, 2018, same neighborhood, right? We're seeing the same thing happening over and over again. This is a major resilience failure. You see homes being rebuilt. The bridges were rebuilt each time. The power lines got put back up, the phone lines, the water, the sewer, everything got replaced and taken out again at huge expense. And there's this is a problem, right? If in a world of unlimited money, not a problem. But in the world we live in, this is a big problem, right? It's a resilience problem, looking for a solution. And what we learned is, look, if you rebuild like for like in the aftermath of a disaster, you're just basically doing destroyed for what's going to get destroyed, right? That's what like for like is. And that's the way we've rebuilt since, the dawn of this country. And it's leading us to a cycle of repeated disaster. So each time we fail, what do we lose? We lose money, we lose time, and we lose the natural resources that go into building all these things. And that is affecting everyone, and especially young people. When they see this happening and they see us in this pattern, it's upsetting, right? And rightfully so. And when this is from the Lancet, when we look at youth attitudes about climate change and natural disaster, well over half of the people report feeling anxiety every day. Every single day worrying about this. Extremely worried. 67% afraid. 67% sad. Right? This is having a profound effect on people. The failures of the grown-ups to solve this problem, right? It ruins your confidence. It takes your confidence down in what's happening. And so the question comes, this is about the UC, right? How can the UC empower the next generation, the generation you're teaching, to deal with this better, right? And so that's what we want to talk about. How can you not just empower them to deal with it, but to lead the next generation through this, right? That's the change we want to see in the world. And the question for a university is, how can we use our knowledge and our resources to get a different outcome than this disaster cycle? And we want to go to the basics, right? It starts with a plan. And a plan that utilizes local knowledge, including the indigenous knowledge of people who've lived here for thousands of years on this land, but also the money that comes through after a disaster, billions of dollars. We've seen this each year. And the people in our community, the human resource, how do we put those to use? We need a plan that does that to rebuild a resilient community. And we need to have this plan not after the disaster strikes, because that's too late. You have to have it before disaster hits. Otherwise, it won't be ready when you need it. And that it won't be able to help you. Before the next disaster strikes, everybody's telling me, hey, this sounds impossible, right? But FEMA has a process for this, and it is possible. And when we think about this from a university perspective, community knowledge needs to be organized studiously for the benefit of the community, right? We're talking about the UC, right? Totally possible, freaking possible, right? But so where do we start? And I wish Sujit was here. Is he still here? He's not. From the UCDRN, I wanted him to see that we had a slide already built in for him from the Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction. And it's really important that the impacts of disasters are felt locally. And the solutions, the most effective ways to reduce vulnerability and exposure need to be executed at the local level where these disasters present. So this whole concept of localization was a huge focus of the Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction in 2019 and followed up again in 2022. Localization of resilience capacity. So how do we do that? We do it one step at a time, right? But it starts with a pre-disaster recovery plan, and this is where the UC and the DRN could be a very effective partner with the community in putting a plan like this together that is from the ground up, and that's what we were talking about, a plan that starts from the grassroots. What are the needs of the community? What are the vulnerabilities and exposures that they're facing, and how can we communicate and collaborate to put together a plan that will help them become more resilient when the disaster strikes and the money comes in. Okay, so we want a plan that's going to help us become resilient, and we need it before the disaster. So then what do we do after that, right? That's when the opportunity comes to get out of the classroom and into the community where the resource that is all of the students and faculty of the University of California, thousands of highly educated people in the event of a natural disaster are just a monstrous resource, right? A huge potential resource, right? How could we deploy thousands of these people trained and ready to help their community respond to these natural disasters and crises, right? And to help implement a smart, well-orchestrated recovery. Who could do that? I think, the UC students and faculty, right? And where do we find them? In 2018, UCSB students came and worked with us in the Bucket Brigade. This is the surf team. They went out and they went to work for the community, digging out homes and clearing open spaces, right? The Circle K community at UCSB, these guys have been working with us for years now. Here they are doing a community uplift project in 2022. The rugby team, they're out there building a food forest fire break to use edible cactuses to protect homes from wildfire in a high fire hazard severity zone. Possibilities are endless, right? But getting out into the community and making that connection with the residents and the university. And then this last winter, on the 5th anniversary of that debris flow, we had another flood and debris flow. And we had to go out and dig out homes again. And students actually who had trained with us for years went and led the grown-ups in the disaster relief operations at multiple sites in the county of Santa Barbara. They were organized and trained, and they led the deployment. And we see a huge opportunity to scale this at the UC and community college level, this ability to lead your community into battle with this hardship caused by natural disasters is really important to consider. And finally, rebuilding the community for resilience, equity, and inclusion, right? So that the poor people don't fall by the wayside, which they almost always do after a natural disaster, and don't recover fully, right? But if we had a plan and the ability to execute as a team, we could do something about that cooperatively, right? And so everybody asks me, says, yeah, that sounds great. Great idea. How the heck are you going to pay for this, right? Which is a good question. Show me the money. But when we think about it, when does the federal government just show up with a huge check for your community and say, I want you to remake yourselves. Here's $1 billion. Happened to us in 2018, right? Here's $1 billion. Remake yourselves. When does it come? Not before the disaster strike. They didn't give us the $1 billion ahead of time. No. They gave it after a natural disaster. That's when the money comes, right? But it's a lot of money. And it wants to get spent really quickly. Those resources are limited. And we need to stop wasting them by building stuff that's like for like and will be destroyed again, right? So there's a huge opportunity here for rebuilding ourselves for grassroots resilience, using the research capacity and of the UC and the student capacity to deploy. There's a real huge opportunity here. We're reaching out to you from the grassroots level, from the community, and saying, hey, let's work together. I think we have a chance if we're willing to take some steps now and not wait till the next disaster hits, but to start acting on behalf of our communities and all the communities represented by the UC now, with this knowledge, with these understandings we've gained from repeated experience, right? And the goal is to transform this disaster cycle that we're in into a community resilience cycle, and one that will build the trust, between my generation and the next generations and the ones before me, and the trust between the university and the community and the government and the residents, and help us get through these challenging times that we're facing now. So this is a call to you all. You're welcome to join us. We hope to see you, if not in the field, maybe we'll be working together on one of these projects someday soon at your UC. And we are the Santa Barbara Bucket Brigade. So thank you so much.
Should I just say amen?
No.
Please, can we get an amen?
Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you, sir.
I just want to say it's great to end on an up, positive note after discussing disasters all day. So thank you again.
I'm serious. Amen, brother. It's been a long day, and like all conferences like this, even though we haven't been together for 3 years because of COVID, a few people leave early, but none of us lost. None of us forgotten. We all have to make sure that we take everything we said here very seriously. I just want to kind of review some of the things we talked about. We talked about climate and the difficulty of getting the right information at the right time in the right place to make the right difference. But that's something we have to do from whatever place we sit. We can't wait for the money. We've got to keep trying and trying very hard. We talked about public and private partnerships. I won't review them all. Red Cross, to all the EY and all those organizations, but also all the state agencies. We're all partners in this. We all have to put our hands to the wheel. The university is forming partnerships, not just here, but around the world. Because who knows when that next disaster is going to be here. And no matter whether it's a Haitian disaster or a Hawaiian disaster or the New Zealand disasters, I've been in most of them. My children say I am a disaster. Because many of us who've been in this have made a life work of it. And I think this is a life's work, and it is the work of the University of California. I think what the Vice President said is really clearly correct. We do have to find a system, a way to get to the future, not reinvent the silos, but figure out how to break them up and recreate things. The best thing we can do, though, is kind of those rapid response teams that form the right way at the right time with the right resources, and whoever's in charge, for that moment, they're in charge. We can't allow hierarchies and things to stand in the way, and we learned that today. We all have this responsibility. I think we also have to understand that this is a global responsibility. California has more resources than any other place in the world to provide help in India, provide help in Brazil, provide help elsewhere, but we also can get some help from what I've learned today from the French, the Indians, and others. So let's put our minds to fashioning these new partnerships and alliances, making them concrete so that we can assemble the same quickly. I think there are three things that this organization can do, and I hope the Vice President will agree with us. The first is continuing what we're doing today, but make sure that we do it frequently enough so this partnership will come up as soon as we do it. The second thing is there's never enough research, and particularly never enough applied research. The research we're not doing enough is in the communities, with the communities. We've got plenty of research on how to handle a fire, what happens to people when they're in a flood, how to recover from things, but we got to be there before the flood is, before the fire is. So, and we have to have a language and a style. I started out in the University of California at Davis and was an extension And we went over to Egypt to see what they were doing to teach them a little bit about extension. And it's on the Nile. And so my interpreter said, this gentleman's saying, until you slept on the Nile and ridden a camel, you can't teach me anything. So the UC can't stand outside the community and wait for that day of disaster. We have to be there before that disaster comes. So that's a real strong message here. Evidence is critical, but it won't turn the day. We're facing a new, almost prolific ignorance. People don't want to know. So that makes our mission bigger, tougher, but I think we're up to it. So lastly, I want to commend Joe and his team. Joe Lightman, stand up. Give that man an applause. Rico. All right. Rico and you guys, these are the dreamers, the schemers. So these dreamers and schemers are going to be with us. Let's help them. They've made the fire. Let's help it burn. Okay? Light it around the world. My own committee, how many people are on the UCN boards, committees, cooperative, what do we call it? Executive committee, they're all up here. Put your hands up. Just let people know how many of us are here. So we are inspired by you. None of us are getting a ton of money for doing this. As a matter of fact, I don't think we can get a published paper from this. The only currency the university knows these days. So, since we've worked hard, we have only one thing to know. We got more work to do. And let's do it together. Let's do it well. I want to thank you. And I think we should have some form of refreshments before we leave. Yeah.
Full disclosure, Ed was the chair of my PhD department 30 years ago. So first, happy hour. We have one. That's the good news. The bad news is no alcohol can be served at this center here. The good news is that we have a venue 450 feet down the street called Ella, and we have a happy hour set up there for you. The bad news is that because we're paying for this through the UC system, we can't buy you alcohol. We've got food and non-alcoholic drinks, so you'll need to get your own harder drinks. The good news, I like to end on good news, is that happy hour prices go until 6 p.m. So it won't be as big of a hit to your budget. I just want to end by thanking our sponsors that made this possible financially, Ernst & Young, EY, AmeriCares, and Miyamoto International, as well as the UC Center Sacramento, who has provided all of these facilities at no charge to us. So, and last but not least, thank you for your participation, your time, your thoughts, and we will meet again because this is the start of a beautiful relationship. I can't remember who said that, but it's a famous line. Casablanca.